So now to the heart of the matter. What can we expect for this summer? How can we prepare, and how can you all get compensated? So for me personally, each of these last, 5 or 6 summers have felt like their very own fire drill, and pun not intended, but they felt like their own fire drill in preparing for, a grid outage. There's been new headlines, new asks of customers, new information. And so what I thought would be important to kind of setting us off on the right foot was to set the context of, what are the different types of outages that we can expect in the summer that are weather related. So with this in mind, there are 3 types of weather-related outages. These are not including outages due to, regular maintenance or other one-off incidents, such as like a truck hitting a pole, etc. So in 2019, following the extensive and really deadly fires of 2018, PG&E began operating the Public Safety Power Shutoff Program, or PSPS. During times of high wind and low humidity, PG&E was directed to proactively de-energize pole transmission lines or other power lines where risk of downed wires posed, a risk of igniting a wildfire. These outages should have been planned with notice to customers, usually within about 24 hours. When forecasts showed high risk, customers would get notice that they might be impacted by PSPS, and will continue to get notices through different channels. But these events impacted a very broad customer base. In 2019, over 2 million customers were impacted by a PSPS event. So in 2021, PG&E began its Emergency Power Safety Settings program, installing devices programmed to de-energize a power line within 1/10 of a second of coming in contact with an object, such as a tree branch, a pole coming down, etc. While not perfect, the use of these EPSS devices have greatly reduced the need for PSPS events, reducing the amount of customers impacted during high wind events. I should mention there's a lot of other things that have been happening that have reduced the need for PSPS events, system hardening, undergrounding. PG&E has gotten better at forecasting and understanding what creates these risks. And I think in 2022, there actually was not a PSPS event called. So the amount of customers have impacted by PSPS has greatly reduced. That said, PG&E, reiterates that PSPS is still very much a tool in the toolbox of mitigating wildfire risk. And so while not perfect, the use of EPSS devices, that middle column right there, enhanced power line safety settings, has reduced the amount of customers impacted. Due to the reactive nature of the devices, there's no notice provided. So that is one downside to this program. You don't get advance notice other than maybe some advance notice that there might be high risk weather. But the impact is reduced to the circuit level. So compared to PSPS, less customers impacted, to a local circuit, no notice, but customers who are still in, high wildfire risk, that could be even the coast side of our service territory, San Mateo County in the hills, you might still be experiencing power outages due to mitigating wildfire risk. And then finally, the third type of possible outage we can expect, and which is why we're here today, is a planned rotating outage, a last-ditch measure to keep the grid energized when energy supply can't meet demand. If you were around in August 2020, we actually saw some of these rotating outages happen. I remember I was down in Santa Cruz, and I was driving through Santa Cruz and was surprised to find the whole community was out of power. It's because the state took proactive measures to initiate rotating outages so that the whole grid would stay online. We also came really close last September to seeing rotating outages, which we'll get to more in the next slide. All right, so last September, we saw an extended heat wave across the West that was unprecedented in both temperature and duration. As we all know, climate change, continues to have longer and stronger heat waves. And as such, we can expect more and more of these heat events that impact our grid. On aggregate, what's happening is that these heat waves increase the demand on electricity from space cooling. And on September 6th of last year, after I think the 6th day of the heat wave, after Labor Day weekend, we saw a new peak demand on the California electricity grid of 52,000 megawatts. So the system had only peaked over 50,000 megawatts twice before. The last time it happened was in 2017, and it barely peaked over 50,000 at 50,117 megawatts. So 2,000 additional megawatts of demand out of 50,000 had a big impact on our grid and our preparation to meet this with generation supply. So, what are we doing to make sure that we're ready for these future heat waves that are increasing the demand on the system, and making sure we don't have to do these rotating outages? So one thing that the state does is they require load-serving entities to contract enough energy to meet its peak forecast load plus a planning reserve margin around 17%. So, and Sarah might correct me when she speaks to this, but it's around 17% above what we expect to our peak forecast to do. So what that means, it's called resource adequacy. What that means is that customers or load-serving entities like Peninsula Clean Energy look at the year ahead and say, this is what we expect in September, in August, what our peak forecast to be. They add an adder contingency saying, okay, well, we could be wrong in our forecast. The heat wave could be that much more extreme. And we need to have contracts in place with generators that say they will serve us energy, or they will serve the grid energy in those times of high need. So that all here on this slide is represented by the solid blue line. It represents all the contracted capacity on the grid on that day, September 6th last year, that was available to meet supply. Now, on the other hand, there's the demand part of this equation. So the dotted blue line here is what the state forecasted in the day ahead forecast. So every day they're forecasting what they expect to need tomorrow. This is the expected forecast of what the demand was going to be based on weather forecasts. So as you can see, in the middle or the morning, we have about 10,000 megawatts of extra capacity. So we're not going to run up to the top of the cap of our capacity. But as the later hours come around 5 p.m. or hour ending 17 or hour 17 here on this chart, you see that the dotted blue line exceeds capacity or supply. And at this point, the state is saying, oh no, we're not going to have enough supply to meet demand. We need to ask our customers, the state, to reduce its load so that we could have enough supply to meet this demand. So getting to this point, this is where this takes us back to last September. We start to get lots of notifications from the state saying, please do what you can, turn off your lights, turn up your AC, do what you can to avoid using electricity during these peak hours between 4 to 9 p.m. It's a heat wave. We're trying to keep the lights on. So the first thing that we see is what we call a flex alert. The state issues a flex alert. This is 24 hours in advance typically. And they're saying, tomorrow's going to be a hot day between 4 and 9. Please voluntarily reduce your demand. So it's really a call to action to customers. In some cases, which we'll get to, there's even payments allowed for customers to reduce demand, compensating customers for that effort and the measures they take to do so. There's also other measures happening at this point, which we won't spend too much time on, but there are other measures such as if there was planned operation on generation, they're saying, hey, postpone your maintenance. We can't do that right now. And then as the hours approach, or the hours of concern approach, we go through different states of an energy emergency alert tiers, which are listed right here. All of them having different levels of risk, and saying we're getting closer and closer to having to issue rotating outages, which is when we reach energy emergency alert 3. At this point, the state does not think they're going to be able to meet load. It's within, you know, the next hour, within the next minutes. They're saying to PG&E and the other IOUs, to publicly operated utilities, saying, get ready to initiate rotating outages. We are not going to be able to supply this much need. Excuse me. So one thing to say about this is critical load customers. I know we might have some hospital folks on the line or listening to the recording. Critical load customers are typically exempt from these kind of rotating outages. And if you're on that same circuit, you'd also be exempt. But these are going to be impacting randomized, or at least to the public randomized. PG&E has their plan in mind of shutting off different loads, just like it happened to me when I was in Santa Cruz a few years ago. So with that, you might be asking, why are we waiting till the last minute to ask customers to do this? What are we doing to make sure there's enough supply and resources on the grid so that we're not coming into these issues, risking power outages and asking customers to turn up their AC during a heat wave? So in short, we're trying. It's a long conversation. I don't think Sarah's going to answer all of these questions, or maybe even any of them, but what we can speak to is what PCE is doing in terms of getting more resources online to, you know, make sure we have enough capacity to meet our customers' needs during these heat waves. So with that, Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Justin. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Matta. I'm a Power Resources Manager on the procurement team. So our team is tasked with procuring the utility scale resources needed to serve our customers. So Justin asked me to come speak about what we do to procure and how that supports grid reliability, especially for these summer heat wave events. So I know you all are pretty sophisticated customers, so you've probably seen this diagram before, but Peninsula Clean Energy is responsible for procuring electricity generation, the solar farms, wind farms out there on the grid that provide energy. Then we deliver that energy to the existing grid infrastructure, which in our area is owned and operated by Pacific Gas and Electric. And the energy flows through PG&E's poles and wires to customers in our service territory. And on the right here, I'm showing our long-term project-specific contracts that we have procured energy from to serve our customers. And it's a little small, but if Justin sends out the slides, you can zoom in and see. We procure long-term contracts from renewable and storage resources only. And you can see on here, the different colors represent the different resource types. You can also see the geographic spread of our resources. We focus primarily in California, but there are a couple resources in Western Nevada that we have recently procured. There's good geothermal resources out there. So we can go to the next slide, just the concept of how our procurement team supports grid reliability. Because we use the existing distribution infrastructure, we can't reserve our specific power plants to serve just our customers. What we do is we procure resources on the grid. They add their energy to the grid, and it supports the entire grid's ability to serve customers during the heat waves. So we have a little diagram here showing our bucket of water that we procure. We add it to the communal tub, and then everyone takes water from the communal tub with equal priority. That's generally what the procurement team does. So we're working very hard, but the impact we have directly on customers like you is diluted by what else is happening on the grid. But we've been working very hard in the past few years. On the next slide, we have the list of resources that are new projects that have been constructed for PCE that will be online in time for this summer's heat waves. And the reason we're really focused on new resources is that obviously as demands are going up with climate change, summers are getting hotter, heat waves are getting more extreme, you need to add resources to the grid. So we're really focused on this concept of adding new resources to the grid that not only help displace and turn off those old, dirty natural gas plants, but also support the higher and higher loads that we're seeing in the coming years. So we have 3 new solar resources a wind resource, and a geothermal resource that will all be online this summer to support the grid. And on the next slide, we have the list of our upcoming resources. These resources are under construction or will soon begin construction. And they will be, a few of them will be online for next summer, and then a handful will come online in the later years. You can see it's more of a mix of storage and geothermal in the upcoming years. We really did solar procurement early in our portfolio, and now we're adding those more firm and flexible resources like storage and geothermal. And then my final slide is just to plug our 24/7 renewable goal. Sean mentioned it briefly at the beginning, and if you haven't heard of it, it's really one of our flagship goals here at Peninsula Clean Energy. In short, we want to procure renewable energy that serves our customers' load each and every hour of the day. Make sure that we're never just running off the goodwill of the grid, which tends to be provided by natural gas plants. We want to make sure that we are totally balanced on the supply side and the demand side with our renewable resources every hour of the day, no matter how much energy customers are using. So on the left, the chart is showing a typical day in the year. The black line is our expected load. Each of the columns is a different hour of the day. So it starts at 1 a.m. in the morning on the left and moves through the middle of the day, and then finally to the evening on the far right. And the colored blocks show the resources in our portfolio. And you can see we have a little bit extra in the summer right now, and we're missing a little bit in the overnight hours. That was as of last summer. Our target to fulfill our 24/7 goal is shown on the right, where we're going to fill out all those empty areas in the overnight hours. And we'll actually have a little bit extra in the middle of the day, which we can either sell back to the market and make money off of, or we can procure extra storage and we can store it for later when we might be short. So this is our goal. We're really excited about it. It's a leading industry goal. We're one of the few communities to have a goal like this, and we're making good progress towards it. So that's what I wanted to share. Justin, let me know if you want me to hit anything else, or if anyone has questions, I'm happy to talk more about our procurement efforts.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I find this, let's see if I can move that. I find this, really interesting, especially, I think there were about 4 incoming storage contracts that your team is working on. And I should also note that was a lot of contracts that you guys are working on. So very impressive work. But the storage is a really cool piece to this story because it's an important resource that's going to allow us to use all the great solar in the state and move it over to those times of high need that we're talking about, between 4 and 9 p.m. during heat waves or just throughout the summer, where typically that's when we're relying on fossil fuel generators. So really excited to see these utility scale storage coming through. Melissa, I see you have your hand raised.
Just quickly on that storage topic. So is that just batteries that y'all are using for the storage, or are there different things that you're considering?
Right. Right now, we only have lithium-ion batteries in our portfolio, but we are very interested in non-lithium technologies like aqueous flow batteries, or even something like a pumped hydro. It's just that the market really isn't there at the commercial scale or the large utility scale to offer those resources at scale. So we've got our eyes peeled, and we'd really like to add some types of those resources to our portfolio.
Great, thanks. And we're also very interested in this 24/7 renewable topic, so I may reach out to you to find out more about what your approach is on this. Thanks for the slide, it's great.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Melissa. And yeah, we could definitely connect you with Sarah and team to learn more about the 24/7 goal in our next meeting. Any other questions while we have a moment? We're approaching the last section of the webinar. I feel like Sarah's topics always get some good questions. All right, so we'll go ahead and move forward. So that was super informative on the supply side. But thinking back to the graph I shared earlier of this supply and demand issue, the day ahead forecast, looking at this is all the available supply we have for tomorrow, and how do we get demand below that? Well, you can't build these resources overnight. So in those moments, we only have one option, is to reduce our demand. So that's when, going back to those flex alerts, the state starts asking customers to reduce whatever they can to reduce the demand below the supply level. I also want to note that, so here's a graph of what happened the same day, September 6th last year. The call to customers went out through the flex alerts and through the multiple grid emergency alerts. You may even recall that the state utilized their emergency text services to text all of us saying, this is a crisis, please do what you can to reduce your load, turn off your spare lights, avoid doing the wash, whatever it was. The call was heard, and the system saw a reduction in about 1,000 to 2,000 megawatt hours during the critical hours of 5 to 6 p.m. Mind you, this was on the 6th day of a 10-day heat wave. So, and this was the 6th day that customers were asked to reduce their demand. So there's even kind of a consensus here that there's more opportunity to get from customers, but customers were fatigued. Customers had heard the message over and over, and maybe they're at this point were like, man, I really just want my AC to be at 74 degrees or whatever they were setting it to. But these demand response measures are really important and have a larger impact than just keeping the lights on. So it's important that we, as customers, as clean energy providers, stay determined during these moments, because they are making an impact. As you can see here, they helped keep the lights on and help bring demand below supply that allowed us to avoid rotating outages. And also on top of that, as Sarah alluded to earlier, the reality is that these generators being used during these peak periods are the dirtiest, they're the least efficient, and they're the most costly generators in the state. So any kWh or kilowatt hour avoided during these times helps reduce emissions and keep costs lower for us all. But that's not a compelling enough case. There, of course, is the Emergency Load Reduction Program, or ELRP, which compensates customers during times of grid emergencies to reduce load. Many of you have heard about this program before, so I'm going to not focus so much on the program, but talk about how we might be able to prepare for this. But I will cover the highlights of the program. And if you have not heard of this program and want more information, you can connect with me, and I'm happy to provide more resources. So the ELRP program is administered by PG&E and implemented by a company called Olivine. Customers are paid $2 per kWh avoided during these events, which can take place during 4 to 9 p.m. any day between May and September. In comparison, the retail rate charge for a kWh or kilowatt hour during this period is about 30 to 45 cents. So the payment for your efforts is about 4 times the retail rate of that energy being consumed. It's completely risk-free, and the program is maxed out at 60 hours of event hours per season. Although I would say that sometimes the event might be for 1 hour, sometimes it might be for 4 or even 5 hours. And that will all be communicated through the enrollment in the program. For those of you with non-fossil fuel generation or storage, incremental exports are in fact eligible for compensation. And should you have a diesel generator, should we reach that energy emergency alert level 3 or something close to that, the governor and the state might ask that you actually use those resources, the diesel generators, in a last-ditch effort to do what we can to reduce demand. And in those cases, those generators would qualify, be allowable, not be subject to any air quality matters. And of course, that would be communicated through the state. So finally, Justin, why are we here today? What's the next steps? What are we asking you to do? So is July 19th, and we've already been seeing record-setting heat waves across the West. I think Phoenix just got a record for 19 consecutive days of heat over 110 degrees, something like that. I used to live there. That sounds normal there, but it's not. That's a lot. That's a lot of hot days in a row. So, you know, we're in it. We can expect that we're going to have some flex alerts, some emergency alerts coming this summer, and we need to be prepared for it. So first thing, I encourage you, if you're not already, is to enroll your organization in the Emergency Load Reduction Program. You could go through the link linked here. You could Google ELRP PG&E program, and you'll be directed to the website. I also encourage you to enroll your personal account if you live in the state. I received a bill credit for about $20 for last year's participation in the Power Saver Rewards program, which is just the more residential, palatable name for the ELRP program. So you could also Google the Power Saver Rewards program and sign up your personal account here in the state. Next is make a plan. During last year's emergency events, the governor asked us as CCAs, as community choice energy program providers, to pick up the phone and start calling customers like you to take action and reduce demand. It became that dire that we were just picking up the phone and calling you all on a Labor Day weekend. It wasn't very fun. What we found is that, you know, customers, while they know their systems in and out, they didn't necessarily they didn't know how to take action in that moment or maybe in that weekend. So it's important to have a plan in place. If you're not, work with your facilities people. Again, these people are either you or your facilities folks are the experts in this. You know your systems. Think about ways or actions that you can take to reduce demand without, critically endangering or impacting your business operations. And with that said, if you're unsure where to start, if you don't know, what might be the best bang for the buck, what we're doing is offering you guys a free consultation with some of our very talented and experienced facility staff that help run our building electrification technical assistance program. So these people are very experienced, qualified, and knowledgeable about building systems. We have folks who specialize in life sciences buildings and tech buildings and hospitals. So we could really give you the best kind of consultation to help you think through what might be some possibilities to reduce your demand during these next flex alerts. And then, of course, I just want to mention that that would be free to you guys. Just reach out to me and I'll help schedule something. And finally, circling back to the commercial flex program that Sean mentioned at the top of the call, top of the hour, this program, while it's not a demand response program, the commercial flex market will provide incentives to more permanently reduce your building's demand across all hours. And it has greater compensation for energy efficiency measures that reduce your demand during 4 to 9 p.m. during the summer. So it will help the overall issue of having really high demand during peak hours that we can't meet. So with that, I want to thank you all for spending your lunchtime with us. Really, it's a pleasure to have you on here. Thank you, Sarah and Sean, for joining us. And I'll open it up to questions, if there are any. I'm not seeing any. Let me make sure I can see the chat.
Just a quick comment on that link. You might want to check that. It didn't work for me. It looks like it might be elrp.olivelineinc.com.
Thank you. I will check it out. I appreciate that, Melissa. And good point. I'll be cleaning up these slides as needed and sending them out. So I will make sure that that goes out in the final copy. All right. I don't see any raised hands or questions. So again, thank you for joining. I will be sure to share the slides. The recording will be available and you know how to reach me. Please do so if any of this piqued your interest, you have follow-up questions, and we'll go from there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Sean,
Yeah.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.